So, what in the world happened to the second Joker film? Hello everyone, I am your host, The Knight, and today we will be discussing the film Joker Dang it, okay, no, it's not a joke, I actually can't say it. I'm just gonna call it Joker 2. When I saw the first Joker movie in 2019, I was captivated by how the film was able to entertain and psychologically manipulate the audience all at once. The intensity, wild analogies, twisted humor, and deep psychological messaging pushed the film beyond anyone's expectations and solidified it for the top Oscar nominations. So, imagine my surprise when I see that its sequel was given one of the lowest DC movie rankings on Rotten Tomatoes, and one of the biggest rejections from the DC fandom. I had to see what all the fuss was about. So without further ado, let's begin. The first main issue that this movie faced was its structure. This Elseworld story decided to experiment with a different formula for this movie. That experimentation was to include the concept of how music can help in healing our minds and understanding ourselves. This psychological test seemed like it would add to the mental imagery that the first film introduced. However, their overuse of musical numbers and mental singing produced the opposite effect for the film. For example, there were several scenes that felt as though they were building up to a similar impactful moment that the first film was full of, only to be interrupted by the start of a musical number. Those musical numbers brought those scenes to an abrupt halt and pulled the audience out of the story. Admittedly, you can see how the director was planning to incorporate music in the movie, but the execution of it was done poorly. In a similar way, the movie had an issue with staying true to its direction or message that came from the first film. For instance, not all those intense scenes were ruined by musical numbers, but instead by the script. Those scenes were building up on both Arthur's and Joker's ideals, messages, and direction of the story that would have better connected both films. However, the scenes then suddenly shift tones or drastically changed in such a way that it dragged the audience away from the scene. It was almost as if the film itself was afraid to be a sequel to the first Joker film. Another issue that the film seemed to face was the perspective and overall narrative. In the first film, the perspective was all focused on the Joker and his slow descent into madness. The audience had no choice but to follow him on his journey and had to decipher if what we were seeing in the film was in Joker's mind or was actually in reality. Whereas this film, the perspective strays away from the Jokers and focuses on a wider range of cast members. The problem with this is that the impact of the original film feels a bit more diminished because of the change in perspective for the film. I'm not saying that the sequel should have been a direct copy of the original, but straying away from it being focused on Arthur and the Joker definitely hurt it. Bit of a side note, and this is where the slight spoilers come in. There were also some characters who were introduced and given the origins of certain Batman characters, and at first it was cool to see, until I realized that having them in the story restricted the overall impact. I was also confused on why they were present in this Joker movie. I would understand if they were all Easter eggs and nice cued references, but the way the film ran made it seem like the director is setting up for future productions with these characters. Now, if that is true, and don't take my word for it, but if that is the case, then the execution of it might have been subtle, but it was poorly done because the focus of the film should have solely been on the Joker, and it felt like it wasn't with the inclusion of a lot of the things that we saw in the background. Honestly, I can't go into any further detail without spoiling the movie fully, and I don't want to do that yet. But what I will say as a sort of counterpoint is that the movie, as bad as it is, does not deserve as much crap as other comic book adaptations like Madam Web or The Flash. Yes, the structure of the film was all over the place. Yes, the execution was poorly done. No, it is nowhere near as good as the first one. But it was still watchable. Honestly, the only reason I would go watch this film is to squeak it past both of those movies, because it doesn't deserve to earn less than them. Another reason, if you're somehow interested to see this film, is to simply go with some friends and to react to this awful movie and have a good time. Because honestly, sometimes watching an awful movie with friends and making fun of it can be a lot of fun. So, with all that being said, I honestly would give the second Joker movie a 5 out of 10. It's not as bad as the lowest of the low for comic book movies, but it's still not great. A full breakdown and reaction will be released when it comes to streaming or DVD, but until then, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button for more content like this. I am your host, The Knight, signing off for now. Have a blessed day and take care. Or direction of the story, or changed in such a drastic